Hello, ladies and gentlemen, 'tis I, Michael A. Grimm, aka the Multi-Voice. I have many voices, but one opinion. And today I got something to do. Got something to say to you guys. This time I'm gonna be on a hiatus for like 2 weeks because there is a role-playing mission for me to do for the Army. So I may not be able to do another video review on next Thursday or the Thursday after that, but I might come back after those 2 weeks are done. And I decided to do this to tell you guys about a certain thing I am going to talk to you guys about. Since I did that one interview where I talked about my Doctor Who audio drama, well, I'm going to talk to you about my Cluedo audio drama that I've been creating. Since I finally got this pin here from a friend of mine, is the house from Clue, and of course this thing I decided to add on my hat. It was given to me by a friend of mine who knows I love Clue. But what got me started in the first place? Well, ever since I was a little kid, it was this movie that got me started into that whole Clue franchise. I mean, I love Clue so much, it flames on the side of my face. I just wanted to say that line. But anyway, since they told me that it was based on a board game, I was like, no way. It was based on a board game. And I became a huge Clue fanatic because I kept collecting all the board games. As you can see behind me, I do have like a couple of board games. Half of them, most of them are in the storage. I might get most of them out of here soon. Oh, my air conditioner going. And of course, I was surprised to get this. I reviewed this one, the graphic novel of Clue from IDW. Since IDW owned all of Hasbro, they pretty much do comic books based from Hasbro, since they did He-Man and G.I. Joe and Transformers and all that stuff. But let's get to the show. You see, a long time ago, when I joined that Doctor Who group that made me decided to become my own doctor and my own adventures, well, let's just say that I was getting kind of tired of Doctor Who. So therefore, I decided to make an audio drama of Cluedo. And since I knew that the reason why I haven't called the series Clue instead of Cluedo is because I knew that it was created in Britain, and I decided to make it more faithful to the old British style. Kind of like I did with my Doctor Who. I like to be more faithful to the UK British style. And, I saw the movie. I enjoyed the Clue VCR mystery game, Clue and Clue Murder in Disguise. I have the first one, but I don't have the second one. And of course, I saw the Clue miniseries, which was a really fun miniseries they made. Even though it's not exactly a murder mystery, it was just a mystery of some sort of conspiracy, like a secret society involved and such. And of course, I remember the game show of Cluedo, which I enjoyed a lot. And of course, I even discovered this Cluedo party CD that came out. I listened to it with great intentions. I wish I had it on CD, along with some of the stuff that comes with it, if I found it on the box. Surprisingly, I was surprised that the Cluedo game series was made back in 1990 and ended in 1993. So, I love Clue and Cluedo so much. If Clue or Cluedo is a woman, I bet she looks more like Miss Scarlet. Hubba, hubba. But since I discovered that now they made Clue as a graphic novel, made the movie, the TV show, all the different versions of the board game. And of course now, thanks to my friend who gave me these Clue pin from those Clue Broadway plays they made, comedy Broadway plays that my friend sent me these pins for me, I finally figured out something. How come they never made an audio drama of Cluedo? So that's where I come in and decided to create my own version. Now, at first I needed a host, somebody who would continue on telling the story and telling you what's going on. So I decided to create my character that I did the voice of, Dr. Buddy Black. Now, the reason why I call him Dr. Buddy Black, because the difference in the Clue and Cluedo, in Clue he's called Mr. Body, and on Cluedo he's called Dr. Black. So I call him Dr. Buddy Black because I couldn't call him Dr. Body Black. I call him Buddy because Buddy is a common first name you call your friends and such. And Buddy is also a name too, so. And I had to think up a voice for him since I just couldn't just randomly just go like, hello, I'm Dr. Buddy Black. I decided to think up a good voice, which I used one of those voices for one of the fan-made audios of Doctor Who back then when I was in the first Doctor Who group. I thought up this voice, which was actually, I based it from a vampire video game that I was a huge fan of playing, so therefore I use this voice for my Dr. Buddy Black. And of course him as a ghostly narrator is the idea that I got from Desperate Housewife. If you remember the first series of the show, you have this one housewife who committed suicide, and then throughout the whole entire show she narrates throughout the whole season. So I thought Dr. Buddy Black should be narrating throughout the whole series. He starts out breaking the fourth wall, telling everybody what goes on, and then he gets murdered and he continues on narrating. And of course there was a character who goes by the name of Ash the Butler. Now, in most of these Clue games, I mean, in every single murder mystery, it's always the butler did it. But not many people thought about the butler who didn't do it, but the butler who's going to solve it. And of course, I remember in every single Clue game, they always made the butler character be the one who suspiciously know exactly who killed Mr. Body and where and with what, but he ain't telling. He wants other people to solve it, and then when they finally solve it, he'll tell them exactly what happened. I combined that with another character who was a suspect, was of course Sergeant Gray, who's a police officer, from that one board game I have, Clue Master Detective. And of course I'm going to introduce more characters from all those other games, so I decided to combine the butler and the cop together, and therefore Ash the Butler is actually Detective Gary Gray, undercover detective. Now, I call him an undercover detective because I have written the script during the time when people were getting all anti-policemen. I mean, I couldn't call him an undercover cop, so I call him an undercover detective. Because nobody can bash a detective. They can bash a cop, but they cannot bash a detective. And after all, he's Scotland Yard, CID. Now, the other characters we're going to talk about, now, before that whole woke stuff started, I mean, I created my first episode called Who Killed Me? And on this one, I have the usual suspects from the modern version of Clue. Now, besides Dr. Buddy Black, I played Colonel Mustard with an old-fashioned military-like impression, like I always be like a certain military colonel. What's what? Pip pip, cheerio, righto. And the reason why I decided to play Colonel Mustard is because when I play Clue, I always play Colonel Mustard because since they didn't have a cop character to play, I play a military colonel. And, of course, there's the character called Dr. Orchid, which, surprisingly, I had one of my dear friends from the Philippines, named Jocelyn, who did a great job of playing Dr. Orchid. So, I just completely be more faithful to the Asian character by letting her be voiced by a Filipino. And, of course, I made Mrs. Peacock be Hispanic, just like the latest new Clue board game they made right now. And I also made Miss Scarlet Indian. Why not? Because in all the other Clue board games, they always change the nationalities of Miss Scarlet. First, they made her white with blonde hair. And then they made her Asian with black hair. And, of course, they made her black. But to me, I want to crank it up a notch. And bam! But, of course, Mrs. Peacock and Miss Scarlet is voiced by my dear friend from Birmingham, Laura Williams. You know, I always enjoy having Laura doing voices for me because besides her playing my companion Hannah in my Doctor Who, I always had her playing some of the suspects in my series. And she always loves working with me. I mean, she always loves recording lines for me. Because to her, it's a pleasure. Because, believe it or not, way before I had her as my companion, she wanted to give up doing voice acting. But when I called her and asked her if she likes to do some lines for my audio, she was thrilled and said yes. And I let her in. And she did an outstanding performance. I mean, she plays her Mrs. Peacock with a posh British accent, which I said that was okay. And of course, I told her to do her Miss Scarlet with her actual Birmingham accent. So, and Professor Plum, I had Adam Fishwick from the north side of England, and he was honored to play Professor Plum, and I was lucky to have him doing the voice of Professor Plum, because I was trying to find somebody to do Professor Plum, and I found Adam. Now, Reverend Green, like I mentioned, my dear friend Yana, who gave me these Clue pins, her husband Alex did the voice of Reverend Green, and of course in the audio he's black, but Alex did a really good Scottish accent. A Reverend who's Scottish. Who'd have thunk it? Now, episode 2 was a little tricky, but now this was during the time after my grandmother passed away. I had to do something to cope over my grief. So, I kept continuing on doing the series. I mean, at first I thought I was just going to make one audio murder mystery of Cluedo, but instead I decided to make a series out of it. And I like to be more faithful to the how the BBC does it, because most of the time when the BBC does a TV series, they always start their series with 6 episodes, and then they end the series there until the studio wants them to make another series. So I decided to make it more faithful and to be more British by just having 6 episodes. And I'm just going to be doing the first season on 6 episodes, and that's it. So, the second episode I made was Goodbye, Mrs. White, I'll Miss You. And Mrs. White was voiced by the lovely Yana, the one who gave me these pins. I told her to play Mrs. White with a French accent. And of course, I did make like a interracial romance between my character and Mrs. White, because my character, Dr. Buddy Black, who is white, Mrs. White is black and French. So I thought it was cool. And of course, the other suspects, I had Monsieur Brunette, voiced by a good friend of mine named Dennis from the Netherlands. I told him to do a French accent, and he did an outstanding job. And of course, I had a friend of mine from Scotland, and I wanted him to play the gardener named Rusty Ryler. And he did a great job doing the voice of the gardener. Of course, I don't know if he's going to return to do the voice of Rusty or not. And of course, there's a character that I did the voice of, except this time it was a woman. Besides doing Dr. Buddy Black, I did a voice of a woman named Madame Rose. And of course, I want to be faithful to the VCR mystery game. Madame Rose is Dr. Buddy Black's sister. And of course, being a gypsy, she has a Romanian accent, so I decided to make myself sound like a woman, but also give her a Romanian accent, so therefore I am Madame Rose, Dr. Buddy Black's sister. Would you like to have your palms read, or see your fortune in my tarot cards? And that was the only time I decided to play a woman in that series. But don't ask me to enjoy it, because I didn't like it. And of course, I had Miss Peach, which surprisingly, that was from Laura. You know, even though Laura is from Birmingham, I asked her, can she do a Southern Belle accent, since Miss Peach is a Southern Belle? And wow, I was amazed, because Laura did an outstanding accent doing the voice of a Southern Belle, and I mean, it just makes me want to hug her if I ever met her in person, because she is the greatest voice actress I ever had in my audio, and she's very talented. And Laura, if you're watching this, don't ever forget it. You are the most talented girl, and I'm so happy to have you during my audios. Don't ever forget it. Because you, like I said before, you are the Johnny Depp to my Tim Burton. Because every time when Tim Burton makes a movie, he always has Johnny Depp star in his movies. Well, every time I make my audio, you always star in it. And you do surprise me on what you're capable of. And, of course, there was also Prince Azure, which was a voice to a friend of mine who is from England, but he was also from India, too. I mean, I can tell he's Indian. I wanted him to do the voice of Prince Azure because I wanted him to be sort of a British, maybe Indian, maybe Arab, something around there. But of course, sadly, that friend decided that this was the only audio that he'd do lines for. But after that, he won't be doing any more lines for me, and that was a bummer. So I need to find somebody else to play him, because some of those characters are going to return in my other series. And of course, I also have a good friend from England named Leah, who did the voice of Mrs. Meadowbrook, a middle-aged woman who always wore turquoise dresses. And she's supposed to be a rich society woman. And then I worked, and of course, the latest episode I have on YouTube right now is, of course, Save My Daughter from the Art Caper. And that's now a little known fact. When the creator who created Cluedo, he had 10 suspects instead of the usual 6. And, of course, the one thing that was kind of changed is that he wanted Mrs. White to be Nurse White. So I took the nurse part and just make the daughter. And the daughter of my character, Dr. Buddy Black, is, of course, Nurse Bella Blanc. I decided to give her a French name, so therefore she's called Blanc, which is French for white. Yeah, I do a lot of I do like to find names in foreign languages which means something. And sadly, Bella Blanc was voiced by somebody who used to be my girlfriend, but now we're no longer together. So I need to find somebody to do Bella Blanc on my other episodes, sadly. And of course, Detective Gary Gray, he was voiced by a friend of mine, but now we went to we're no longer friends anymore. So I need to find somebody who can do the voice of Detective Gary Gray. Of course, I have found somebody, but I hope that he does a good job. Replace my friend who used to play Detective Gray. Now, let's talk about the episodes that I'm going to be announcing. The 3 more episodes that I'm going to be working on. Episode 4, Are You Being Killed at Gold Brothers? Now, I know what you're thinking. It sounds so similar to Are You Being Served? Well, I'm a huge fan of Are You Being Served? It's my favorite British comedy of all time. I grew up watching that show ever since I was a little kid. But of course, when I was really young, I thought that Are You Being Served was a murder mystery comedy, but I was wrong. It's not. It's just a sitcom involves a group of people working in a clothing store. But of course, on Are You Being Killed at Gold Brothers, there's a murder going on in the clothing store, department store. And of course, I need to find somebody named... Now, here's one thing I want you to know. There was also 2 other characters that the creator was planning on having as suspects, but it turns out they never used them in any Clue game, but now I'm using them in my audio. There is Mr. Gold, and he's in charge of the clothing department store. He gets murdered. And of course, there's another character I'm also introducing, Chief Inspector Beige, which I'm going to be doing the voice of as well. Chief Inspector Beige is the one who's going to promote Gary Gray from detective to inspector. And of course, the voice I'm going to give to Inspector Beige, since I always love Christopher Lee and his performance as Sherlock Holmes, I decided to let Chief Inspector Beige give him a Christopher Lee impression. I am Chief Inspector Beige, and I want you to solve the next case. You are now put to the test. And then and of course, this is where I'm going to be scrambling up the usual suspects from the other episodes, so some of them are going to be murderers too. And also, there was on episode 5, this one is called A Killer in the Silver Boardwalk. It's a murder happening in a boardwalk theme park. And, of course, another character that the creator created, but none of the creators who made the board game never gave that character a chance, Miss Silver. Miss Silver is the owner of the boardwalk known as Silver Boardwalk. And she gets murdered. And then, last but not least, episode 6. On episode 6, it's called A Ghost Fight in the Old Town Tonight. And it turns out that the mayor is rounding everybody in the town called Cluedosville. That's where I called it. I think I call it Cluedosville or Cluesville. I think I call it Cluedosville. I thought it would be a good name for the town. But their mayor, he gets murdered, and the mayor is named Ian Mask. No, not Elon Musk. Ian Mask. He's the mayor of the town. But here's the twist. You see, he gets murdered on purpose because he wants to turn the town into a ghost town. I mean, getting rid of the living and making it into a ghost town. And I, Dr. Buddy Black, don't want that to happen because he loves the town. So, all of a sudden, he gets help. He gets help from the victims from the other episodes. They got out of heaven to help Dr. Buddy Black save the town. And that's how I'm going to end it. And there's going to be a very surprising cameo to another character from another board game. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys because it's going to be a huge surprise at the end of the episode, and I think some of you are going to be very impressed or surprised about it. And you know, I always admired and one thing I always known, at the end of my episodes, I always give credit where credit is due because that's why I always believe in giving credit to those who created things I love. So that's why at the end of the credits, I always show this. The creator of Cluedo and Clue by Anthony E. Pratt. Anthony E. Pratt is the man who I admire because he's a really great guy. And of course, right now I've heard that he has a daughter who honors her dad. Her name is Marcia Lewis. Marcia Lewis. Hey, she's in Birmingham. Huh. My dear friend Laura is in Birmingham too. Hey Laura, if you found Marcia Lewis, tell her to check out my Cluedo audio dramas and see what she thinks. Because if she listened to my audio and even give him a comment on my audio drama, that will be a dream come true. I mean, fingers crossed to show that I really show my respect to Anthony E. Pratt's creation. Oh, one more thing I forgot to mention. On Save My Daughter from the Clue Caper, that one I took from a Clue rip-off board game that Hasbro and Parker Brothers, they ripped off their own game. They made a board game which was pretty cheap called Mystery Game. And I used the same suspects, which I'm going to tell you who played who in that series. Now, I took Dr. Rose from Mystery Game, and I replaced her with Lady Lavender from the other Clue games. And she's also voiced by my Filipino friend Jocelyn. And also I had General Umber, who is voiced by a good friend of mine, Isaac, from Australia. It's not often that I have friends from Australia, so I figured, what the hell. And of course, Sir Yubei, who is voiced by Dennis. And of course, I had Yana do the voice of Madame Ruby. And of course, I also did the voice of Mr. Pine. Now, I wanted to be more faithful to... I mean, since in Cluedo he's called Reverend Green, but in America he's called Mr. Green. So I thought of Mr. Green as like some sort of a rich tycoon type guy. So I decided to give him a New York accent, going like, "Hey, how you doing? I'm Mr. Pine. Good art museum you got here. I'm a businessman here. Bada bing, bada boom. Forget about it. Hey, oh." And of course, I had Laura do Miss Azul, who's like a young Miss Peacock. And I also told her to do an Australian accent, which she did a good job. I don't know what I can do without Laura. But anyway, this is my talk, my interview about my Cluedo series. And did you know that before Richard E. Pratt made Cluedo, there was another murder mystery board game that they made? It was called Mystery. But of course, I guess the board game was very complicated. That's why Cluedo or Clue is a lot more easier to solve, I guess. I never played Mystery, but if anybody could mail me a board game of Mystery, I'll try it out and see what I think. But I bet it might be pretty complicated. But anyway, this is my review for the day, and for those of you who like my my talk about my Cluedo series, please leave a comment down below, hit like and subscribe. And if any of you haven't heard the entire series of Cluedo, I'm sending the link right here, so you guys could give my series a listen from episode 1 to 3, and I'll probably make some more episodes along the way. So, happy sleuthing!